The first time Colonel Amar Kate had been shown the room, he had expected something grandiose. Perhaps a space befitting the conspiratorial whispers that circulated among palace staff. A booth. Mysterious red door at the end off the West Wing service corridor. Their reality was both more mundane and more extraordinary. $1.4 billion. That was Chinese government's initial offer for the new element discovered in Burkina Faso. Then the United States came in with $2.7 billion. Russia extended a $3.5 billion proposal. Within a week, the figure had reached $12 billion, and the phones wouldn't stop ringing. As Tro watched the world powers greed, he smiled. None of them understood the true value of burkinium. This element wasn't just a mineral. It was a force that would redistribute records in energy, information, technology, and defense industries. And Tro was preparing an entirely different plan for sharing this power. Ibrahim Traoré stared at the small glass vial on his desk, studying the iridescent blue crystals inside. They looked almost ordinary, similar to copper sulfate crystals from a high school chemistry experiment. Yet, they represented perhaps the most significant scientific discovery of the century. A discovery that had thrust Hismil, landlocked West African nation, into the center of global geopolitics. 3 months earlier, Dr. Fatoumata Ouédraogo, a brilliant material scientist who had returned to Burkina Faso after completing her doctorate at MIT, had been conducting routine geological surveys in the remote northern region near the Mali border. What she found in an abandoned colonial-era copper minehead initially seemed like an anomaly. Unusual crystal formations that didn't match known mineral compositions. Further testing revealed some Athinkic Strendi, a previously unknown element with atomic number 119, a super heavy element beyond the current boundaries of the periodic table, more remarkable than its mere existence, Wehrite's properties, stable at room temperature, with unprecedented in electrical conductivity, energy storage, and quantum interactions. The implications were staggering, an element that could revolutionize everything from battery technology to computing, from energy isolation to material science. An element that, unlike many theoretical superelements created in laboratories, existed naturally and could be extracted in commercially viable quantities. Dr. Ouédraogo had immediate contact President True bypassing normal bureaucratic channels due to the sensitivity of her discovery. Traoré, with his military background and strategic mindset, had grasped the significance immediately. He had ordered absolute secrecy while commissioning discreet verification from trusted internationalities, who had no ties to major powers or corporations. Now verification was complete, and the world was beginning to know that something wicked had been discovered in Burkina Faso. But the exact nature and capabilities of burkinium remained top secret. The bidding war had begun before any technical specifications had even been released. "Mr. President," said Colonel Amara Canetro's head of security, entering the office after a brief knock. "The American delegation has arrived. They're waiting in the diplomatic reception room." Chur carefully returned the vial to a secure case. "And the others, the Chinese, will arrive in approximately 1 hour. The Euro representatives are scheduled for late afternoon. The Russians have requests to reschedule for tomorrow morning. According to plan." Trey nodded. Everyone separated, everyone impatient. The strategy had been deliberate. Schedule the major powers in sequence, never allowing them to coordinate or compare notes. Maintain information asymmetry. Let their competitive instincts drive up their offers while keeping them uncertain about what exactly their rivals were proposing. As he prepared to meet the American delegation, True reflected on how rapidly events had unfolded just 3 months from Discover-Rido global bidding war. 3 months in which his small team of trusted advisors and scientists had worked around that clock to understand What they had found to secure the discovery site and to develop a strategy that would maximize the benefits for Burkina Faso. Only 12 people had seen the element in its raw form or knew its full capabilities. 12 people sworn to absolute secrecy, operating out of a secure laboratory hastily established beneath the presidential palace. 12 people who understood they were handling something that could transform not just Burkina Faso's future but the global balance of power. The Americans were waiting in the ornate reception room, a relic of colonial architecture repurposed for the modern Burkina Faso government. The delegation consists of 3 people: a senior State Department official, a prominent technology entrepreneur, who served as a special advisor to the White House on critical minerals, and a renowned material scientist from a national laboratory. Mr. President, State Department official began after formalities were exchanged. We appreciate your willingness to meet with us regarding this extraordinary discovery. Traoré nodded politely, but said nothing. Employing the strategic skills he had learned was often more effective than words. In negotiations, the official continued, slightly unsettled by the lack of response. A sweeve indicated the United States is prepared to make a substantial offer for exclusive rights to Burkinium. Our latest proposal of $2.70 billion represents not just financial compensation, but a comprehensive package, including technologic, ports, educational exchange, and defense cooperation. And this figure has been approved at the highest levels. Traoré asked, his voice neutral. Traoré allowed a small smile. So $3.70 billion, potentially a significant sum. Hep housed deliberately. Though I understand Chinese initial position began at $1.40. $4 billion, but has since been revised substantially upward. The Americans exchanged glances, taking the debate exactly as anticipated. The State Department official cleared his throat. Mr. President, we would of course be willing to reconsider our position if necessary to ensure this strategic resource remains in friendly hands. Perhaps we could see some medicamentation of the element's properties. We could better assess its true value. All delegations will receive same technical briefing materials. As a conclusion of these initial meetings, Traoré replied smoothly. For now, I can confirm that Burkinium's properties include room temperature supervent and quantum coherence capabilities beyond anything currently achievable with known elements. The scientist in the delegation couldn't contain her reaction, eyes widening AAF implications. If true, those properties alone would justify valuations far beyond what was currently being offered. We'll need to consult with Washington. The State Department official said quickly. Of course, Traoré responded. Though I should mention that we're operating on a comparsetamol, several parties have expressed an interest in moving forward rapidly. The meeting concluded with diplomatic pleasantry, but the message had been sent. The bidding was just beginning, and time was limited. As the American delegation departed, Traoré checked his secure phone for updates. The message from Dr. Ouédraogo was concise. Extraction optimization successful, yield estimates increased by more good news. The initial discovery site was proving even more productive than first assessed. If the current extraction rates could be maintained, Burkina Faso's reserves of burkinium would be sufficient to maintain a strategic position for decades, not merely years. The subsequent meetings followed a similar pattern, each delegation offering increasingly generous financial packs, technological partnerships, defense agreements, and development aid, each carefully led to believe they were the preferred partner without any firm commitments, each departing with that clear impression that time was running short and competitors were circling. But Ria had no intention of managing this conventionally. Have all the delegates left the country? He asked Colin Cannon as they entered the secure elevator that descended to the underground laboratory where the real work was happening. The Americans and Europeans have departed. The Chinese delegation remains, but is scheduled to leave tomorrow morning. The Russian Tsarev at 10 and our other guests arriving discreetly over the next 48 hours as arranged. All security protocols in place. The elevator doors open to reveal a state-of-the-art research facility that would have been unimaginable in Burkina Faso just months earlier. Funded from emergency stratigraphs and constructed with remarkable speed. The lab had been built to provide a small team of Burkina Faso with the resources they needed to understand and develop Burkinium's potential. Dr. Ouédraogo approached as they entered. Her expression animated despite late hour. Mr. President, we've had an author breakthrough. The quantum coherence properties are even more restable than we initially measured. The potential applications. For computing beyond anything currently theorized. Traoré nodded. Following her to a workstation where complex simulations the elements molecular behavior. Though not a scientist MISP, he had spent countless hours being briefed on the technical aspects of the discovery. Understanding that knowledge was leverage in the unprecedented situation they found themselves in and the security implications, he asked. Dr. Ouédraogo's expressions grew more serious. Confirm that elements properties would render current encryption methods obsolete. Whoever controls quantum computing at the scale essentially controls the global information infrastructure. This assessment aligned with what Tro had already intuited, that Burkinium's value and far beyond mere financial metrics. It represented a fundamental shift in technological capability that would advantage whoever controlled it to an extent not seen since, perhaps, the development of nuclear technology, which makes our approach all the more critical, he said. Is the presentation for our actual partners prepared? Yes, Mr. President, full technical specifications. Extraction methodologies and development roadmaps, everything they need to understand both the opportunity and our proposed framework. While the major powers had been engaged in their bidding war, a distraction Traoré had deliberately encouraged. High's actual strategy had been taking shape in parallel, a strategy not of selling to the highest bidder, but of creating something far more revolutionary. 2 days later, as Russian and American officials were still awaiting responses to their competing offers, a very different meeting was taking place in the secure conference facility beneath the presidential palace. Around the table sat representatives from 9 nations: Ghana, Senegal, Rwanda, Kenya, South Africa, Malaysia, Vietnam, Chile, and Uruguay. None were global superpowers. All were developing nations with strong technical capabilities, stable governments, and a shared history of navigating between major power blocks without becoming subservient to any dot. Thank you for responding so quickly. Tour invitation, Traoré began, addressing the assembled delegates. What we're about to share with you is known to more than 20 people worldwide. Before we proceed, I must ask each of you to conform your government's commitment to the confidentiality protocols you've already signed. After receiving affirmations from each delegate, Traoré nodded to Dr. Ouédraogo, who activated Theorem's advanced presentation system. Fourth, next hour she provided a comprehensive technical briefing on Burkinium, its properties, potential applications, extraction methodologies, and strategic implications. The presentation included information that had been deliberately withheld from the major powers delegation. As the briefing concluded, the room was filled with a mixture of awe and strategic calculation. The South African Rupert was the first to speak. This is beyond extraordinary. You've essentially discovered the holy grail of material science. The major powers must have offering astronomical sums. They, Erator confirmed. The current high bid is $12 billion, and it's likely to go higher. Then, with respect, Mr. President asked the Chilean representative, why are we here? Burkina Faso could transform its entire economic future with such resources. Traoré smiled. Because we believe there's something more valuable than money, something that the major powers can or will not offer. He rose, moving to the head of the table. Throughout history, transformative negotiations have emerged. Steam power, electricity, nuclear energy, the internet. Each time these technologies have been controlled by a small number of nations who use that control to extend their global dominance. Each time developing nations have been forced to either accept technological dependency or remain excluded from progress. He gestured to the molecular models of Burkinium still rotating on the display screens. This element represents a potential shift in human technological apply, as significant as any AFTO's previous revolutions. If controlled by existing power structures, it will simply reinforce the current global hierarchy. "What are you proposing?" asked the Rwanda delegate. A consortium chair replied, "Equal partnership among our nations to develop Burkinium technology collectively, shared research, shared applications, shared benefits. No single nation, including Burkina Faso, would have the exclusive control or veto power." The room fell silent as the implications of this proposal sank in. What Traoré was suggesting was unprecedented. A technology sharing agreement that would boost the major powers entirely and create an independent bloc with capabilities potentially exceeding Thasiof's current global leaders. The political pressure would be immense, observed the Vietnamese representative. The major powers would not simply accept beyond Claude from such technology. Traoré acknowledged. Which is why our approach must be both strategic and transparent. We're not proposing to happenize this discovery or to use it against any nation. We're simply asserting our right to develop a two-side traditional power structures, and Burkina Faso is prepared to share control of something worth tens of billions, asked the Malaysian representative. When you could simply sell to the highest bidder, Traoré's expression grew more serious. What is the true value of technologically Nandan? Of determining our own development path rather than following God, prescribed by former colonial powers or new economic hegemons. Some things cannot be measured in dollars or yuan. He paused, looking around the table. Besides, our analysis suggests that the consortium approach will actually generate greater long-term value for our participants, including Burkina Faso. A monopoly sold to America or China would yield a one-time payment. A share technology platform developed by our consortium could transform all our economies for generations. The discussion continued late into the night, addressing practical questions of financing, security, governance, structures, and diplomatic strategy, bimmerning the framework of an agreement that had taken shape. The Ouagadougou Protocol for Collaborative Technological Ventil, named after Burkina Faso's capital city. As the delegates departed to consult with their governments, Traoré knew that the most challenging phase was still ahead. The major powers would not react well to being circumvented, especially once they realized the full strategic implications of Burkinium: economic pressure, political destabilization, unattempts, and even military threats were all possibilities to security. Team had already begun preparing for yet. There was also a sense of profound historical significance to what they were attempting. For perhaps the first time since the colonial era, African and other developing nations had an opportunity to leapfrog existing technologic hierarchies rather than simply following paths established by the global north. 1 week later, as the deadly given to the major power lapsed without any response to their increasingly generous offers, the first thence of the consortium's existence began to emerge in international diplomatic circles. Unusual patterns afterveil among scientific delegations. From 9 prospective member nations, unexplained communications, security tupperates, discrete inquiries about advanced research equipment from multiple countries simultaneously. In Washington, Beijing, Moscow, and Brussels, intelligence analysts began piecing together fragments of information, gradually forming a picture of that alarmed policymakers. Not merely thought their individual bids for Burkinium had been rejected, but that something far more disruptive was taking shape, a technological alliance outside their control. The first official response came from the United States in the form of a direct call from the President, Tatru. Mr. President. The American letter began his tone carefully balanced between collegiality and concern. We've been hearing some concerning reports about your plans for the newly discovered element. I wanted to speak with you directly about the importance of responsible management of such a strategic resource. We are committed to responsible management, Traoré replied calmly. That's precisely why we've developed an approach focused on collaborative development rather than exclusive control. There was a pause on the line. We understand you may be forming some kind of technology sharing arrangement with several nations. While we respect your sovereignty, we have serious concerns about potential proliferation risks. There are now upon applications in our development roadmap, Traoré countered, though Bothman knew that many dual-use technologies could have military implications. Nevertheless, the American president counted. The United States would be prepared to substantially increase our financial offer, perhaps as high as $20 billion, in exchange for exclusive partners. We would also be willing to include Burkina Faso in our closest tier of security arrangements. The implicitness was clear. Accept our offer or potentially face classification as a security concern. I appreciate your generous offer, Traoré responded lickly. But our approach is not primarily motivated by financial considerations. The Burkinium Consortium represents a new model of technology cultivantal that we believe better serves the interests of historically emergent nations. Similar conversations played out with leaders from China, Russia, and the European Union. Over the following days, offers of financial incentives gradually gave way to thinly veiled warnings about international stability and responsibly techla management. Economic advisors in major obidos began discussing potential sanctions against consortium members. Military planners updated contingency options for Tarija. Yet, something unexpected was also occurring. As details of the consortium structure and philosophy became more widely known, public opinion, many countries began shifting in its favor. The narrative of smaller nations' collaboratively developing transviv technology outside the control of traditional powers resonated, particularly among younger generations increasingly concerned about technological monopolies and global inequality. Scientists and technologists published open letters supporting the consortium's approach. Civil society organizations highlighted the potential for more equitably technical distribution, even with immature powers' significant constituencies. Bonn, Missisbon, questioning their government's social stance toward what was fundamentally a peaceful scientific laboratory. 3 months after the initial discovery of Burkinium, Ibrahim Traoré stood before the United Nations General Assembly, prepared to publicly announce what had until then been developed in relative secrecy. Distinguished delegates, he began, "Today I stand before you to announce a development that we believe represents not just a scientific breakthrough, but a new model for how transformative ecology can be managed for the benefit of humanity." He outlined the discovery of Burkinium, its extraordinary properties, and the formation of what was now officially called the Global Technology Equity Consortium. 9 founding nations committed to collaborative development, the element's applications, with a governance structure ensuring equal participation regardless of economic highs or military power. Throughout human history, Traoré continued, technological innovations have typically reinforced distinct power structures. The nation-state controlled steam power controllable trade. The nations that first harnessed electricity dominated industrial production. The nations that developed nuclear technology shaped the post-war order. He paused, looking across the assembly. We are proposing a different path, not monopoly, But collaboration, not concentration of technological power, but distribution, not exclusion, but invitation to participate on equal terms. The speech was broadcast globally, reaching audiences far beyond the diplomatic community. As Traoré outlined the consortium's open application process for additional member nations and its commitment to developing civilian applications ranging from energy storage to medical technology, public support continue to build. Most significantly, he announced that while the consortium would maintain certain proprietary causal F, it would make a core set of Burkinium applications available through open licensing to address global challenges, beginning with advanced energy storage systems that could make renewable energy viable even in regions with limited infrastructure. Their action from major powers was mixed. Publicly, they expressed cautious support for scientific collaboration, while emphasizing the need for appropriate safers. Privately, they continued applying diplomatic and economic pressure on consortium members attempting to fracture the alliance before it could fully consolidate. But the momentum had shifted. Additional nations began applying for consortium membership, willing to accept its strict governance arrangements in exchange for access to transformative technology. International financial institutions, initially hesitant to antagonize major powers, gradually began engaging with the consortium's development bank, attracted by the economic potential of its technological roadmap. 6 months after his address, Traoré stood at the opening ceremony of the Global Technology Equity Consortium's first major research facility, not in Burkina Faso, but in Rwanda, a deliberate choice to demonstrate the truly collaborative nature of the initiative. Similar facilities were under construction in each member nation, creating a distributed research network that would be difficult to pressure or control. Ash surveyed the assembled scientists, engineers, and government representatives from across the consortium's now 15 member nations. Traoré reflected on how far they had come from that first moment when Dr. Ouédraogo had shown him the iridescent blue crystals from an abandoned mine. What had begun as a potential windfall for Rhone's small African nation had evolved into something far more significant, a challenge to the very structure of global technological development. A demonstration that the nations traditionally excluded from the highest years of scientific advancement could chart their own course when given the opportunity. 1 year ago, he told the gathered audience, only 12 people had seen Burkinium. Today, thousands of researchers across our consortium are exploring its possibilities. Tomorrow, millions of people will benefit from technologies derived from this discovery. He gestured to the advanced laboratory behind him. This facilitator prints more than scientific research. It represents a choice to develop transformative lac collaboratively, rather than competitively, equitably, rather than exclusively. The path ahead remains long. Major powers continue their efforts to either control or contain Burkinium technology. Security threats against consortium facilities and personnel required constant vigilance. The technical challenges of developing applications for such a novel element were substantial. Yet with each passing month, the consortium's positions tend. Initial applications, energy storage and computing were proving even more promising than projected. The distributed development model was generating innovations that might never have emerged in a more centralized approach. The economic benefits for member nations were beginning to materialize in tangible ways. For Ibrahim Traoré, watching a group of young scientists, including many from Burkina Faso, would never have had such opportunities previously collaborating on next-generation quantum computing architecture. The true value of their approach was clear. Beyond the technology itself, beyond the economic potential, they were creating a new model of global scientific laboratory. One where discovery in a remote African mine could benefit humanity without reinforcing historical power imbalances. The iridescent blue crystals that only 12 people had initially seen were transforming not just technology, but the very structure of who controlled that technology and how its benefits were distributed. In doing so, they were challenging Gaston's about global order that had persisted since the colonial era, assumptions about which nations could lead technological revolutions and which were destined to follow. As Traoré had told the bidding superpowers when rejecting their increasingly desperate for, Burkinium wasn't just a mineral. It was a force redistributing the cards soon, the global game of technology, energy, and information. A force thought properly directed could help rewrite rules that had disadvantaged developed nations for centuries. And that hair-flected, as he watched the diverse team of scientists at work, was truly beyond any price that could have been offered.